Everyone, and happy weekend. I wanted to take some time to make a digital version of the presentation I gave last week concerning the small group rollout in case you wanted to go back and view the slides again or you missed it for some reason. So, this coming Monday, we will begin our small group rollout at Chesney. It is officially going to be a 6-week rollout, but you know your classroom. So if you are a returning teacher and you are familiar with this layout, then you can feel free to adjust this timeline based on where you are with your students. If you are a new teacher to Chesney, I would recommend you using this full 6 weeks to slowly teach your students the expectation and provide just a slower rollout for yourself to feel organized and set up for success. Okay, so the first thing that we talked about was the differences between IF versus the reading block. So, your small groups in instructional focus, like we talked about with Ms. Gels a few weeks ago, these lessons are going to come from iReady. We will be using those domain specific groupings or groupings based on a certain skill or an AKS in either literacy or math. And so, with regards to literacy, students can use different books, but the focus is on a particular skill or a strategy that they have already learned. In reading small groups, however, we're going to be grouping our students based on their Lexile level, so their reading level. And so these small groups are going to be using lessons from the book room sets. So once you determine your students' Lexile levels, you will be able to eventually later in the rollout find sets of books where each student will have the same book and you will work with that group on this book over the span of multiple lessons. So the first thing that we need to do is determine accurate Lexile levels for our students. We are able to get a baseline Lexile level using iReady. So if you go on your iReady dashboard, you will be able to see what Lexile level that test determined them to be at. And again, we always talk about needing multiple points of data. So this is our baseline, but we want to check in on this level to make sure that it's not too easy or not too hard so that we're instructing our students in an accessible and appropriate level for them. So once you go in iReady and you write down each of your students' Lexile band or Lexile level, you're going to use the sheet I passed out last week to then correlate that to a letter level because that's how our books are organized in the book room. Once you kind of have your starting point for your Lexile levels for each student, we're going to be making some groupings for them and we're going to be introducing them to this small group rollout using TUB activities and also literacy based activities. So let's take a few minutes just to talk about the differences between those two things. So, TUB activities are any non literacy activities that students can work on independently from the teacher. So, this can be math manipulatives, puzzles, drawing, multiplication games for the upper grades, geo boards, Legos, really anything that you can give students in a group and they can work on that independently of you without any assistance. The goal here is just to teach students the expectation of being in a group because the end goal is that you will have students in your group working on those book sets from the book room. And so you want your students to understand what voice level they need to be at and what working independently in a group will look like. Once they have shown that they can have stamina in an independent group and know the expectations, we will begin to move those groups into literacy based activities. And those are the activities that you may be used to in your reading blocks, such as independent reading, reading to a buddy. They might be doing a writing prompt or some response about reading. They may be working on word study or phonics, and they also may be on technology, either on their iReady pathway or using other programs such as Epic or RazKids. This is not to say that each time in your reading block, you have to have 4 different groups doing 4 different things. The main thing we want students working on is having practice with the skill that you just taught in your mini lesson, as well as just opportunities for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And so you can begin to think about how you want to roll these different literacy-based activities out to your students. So here's a weekly overview sample of what the 6 weeks will look like. And I'll briefly go through each week, but just know if you're new, we're only going to be focusing on 1 week at a time. So don't let this slide overwhelm you. But I want you guys to have a more broad understanding, and then we'll begin to get more specific. So in week 1, which is this coming Monday, our goal is really to just establish those small group expectations. And so all of our students will be in those TUB activities. Legos, Unifix cubes, etc. You're going to be working up to 10 to 15 minutes during this week. So that means you might show the groups of where each particular student is going, and you're going to start your timer. And your goal is to go around and provide positive praise, to give out Sparky Bucks for students that are following your expectations, maintaining a level 0 or a level 1, depending on the activity. As your students get more comfortable with this, you can pull students to your table to assess their Lexile level informally as well. When we get into week 2, we're still in those TUB activities, but now instead of walking around and kind of conferring and providing positive praise without you having a group, you are going to pull one new group to your table and introduce a literacy activity. So it may be that week 2, you decide to introduce Read to Self. Now, your students may already have been engaging in independent reading, but this provides you an opportunity to reestablish those expectations of how we treat books, how we get our book box, and how we really practice that independent skill that we're asking them to do based on the mini lesson. And so you could do that independent practice with each of these groups at your table, while at the same time also informally assessing those Lexile levels. So in this week 2, let's say you have 5 groups. Monday, you're going to see one group. Tuesday, you're going to see another group. But each day, you're going to be introducing the same literacy activity so that by the end of the week, everyone in your class understands the expectations for independent reading, right? So then moving into week 3, now we're introducing a new literacy activity. So this could be Read to Buddy. It could be what are my expectations when students are working independently with technology. And so you're introducing a new literacy activity with you at your table. And then one group is doing the previously taught literacy activity. So they're doing independent reading. And then the rest of your groups are still in those tubs, those Legos, those Unifix cubes. So we're beginning to switch out TUB activities for literacy activities, but only after we have established those expectations and explicitly taught what we want those various literacy centers to look like. We're continuing to assess those Lexile levels as we go. So as we move into week 4, now we're hoping that our students are able to have stamina for 20 minutes in those activities. They're either in a TUB activity or they're in one of those literacy activities, but with the expectation that they can work at a level 0. They know the expectations, they know what they're supposed to be doing for that 20 minutes so that they're not having to raise their hand and ask you questions or bother you while you are with your group. So during this group, you are introducing your third literacy activity. Maybe you want some of your students to be working in a phonics-based center or something similar, right? Maybe writing. So you're introducing that literacy activity while 2 of your groups are doing previously taught literacy activities. So you may have one group with you, one group doing independent reading, and one group in technology. And then your other 2 groups are still in those TUB activities. And again, each week you're seeing one group and you're introducing and teaching that new literacy activity while still checking in on your expectations and providing positive praise for the ones that you have already taught. By the time we get into week 5, we're now into 20-minute rotations. So there are no more TUB activities by the time we get to week 5. Every group is in a literacy-based activity. And then you are either pulling a group to kind of check in on those literacy activities you taught. Maybe you're teaching one more new literacy activity, or you can pull one of those book set groups and begin to do that lesson plan with them. Okay. But the biggest thing for week 5 is all groups are now in literacy activities and there's no more tubs at this point. By week 6, our goal is that everyone, right after the mini lesson and the independent practice, is moving into those 20-minute groups where you have one 20-minute group using those book sets for the book room, and everybody else is working in their literacy activity for 20 minutes, and you'll see a different group each day. So here's visually how it might look. I'm going to send a link to a slide that you can edit that looks something like this, but a lot of teachers will use a similar slide to organize their students in those different groups based on their Lexile level. And then students know where or what center they're going to. And you kind of have your visual timer here as you work up to that stamina. And then eventually at the end, they'll know how much time they have left within the 20 minutes. So you can see here for week 1, everyone is in those tub activities. And I'm just using my timer to build that stamina. I might start my timer. Maybe they're working really well for 2 minutes and then it starts getting a little bit loud. Then I might pause my timer and say, all right, guys, we're going to try that again. Remember, here are the expectations. And then maybe you try it a couple times on that day, see what amount of time you can get your students to, with the eventual goal of working up to that 15, 20 minutes. So in week 2, now you are introducing one new literacy activity and everybody else is in tubs. Then you'll see on week 3, one group is working on the literacy activity you taught the previous week. You're teaching a new literacy activity and everyone else is in tubs. And then by that week 6, you are teaching a guided reading group. We are now going to call them skilled reading groups using those book sets from the book room. And everybody else is in a literacy-based activity extending upon that skill that you taught in the mini lesson. Okay. So a lot of information, but the ending thought really is that next steps for just this coming week is this right here. So we are here. Our goal for this 4-day week coming up is that we can have our students working up to 10 or 15 minutes in tub activities, that they will understand the small group expectations, and that we can begin to assess some of those Lexile levels. So action steps: locating a Lexile level for each student, correlating this level into a letter, and then pulling single books at this level to put in their book box or to use for that assessment. Next, you're going to use those levels to group your students into 4 or 5 reading groups. These groups may change as you determine, which level is appropriate for each student, but you're going to begin to group them based on reading level. And then you're going to determine what are my tub activities going to be so that I can be organized and prepared and ready to go. Okay. So reach out if you have any questions. I'm happy to help you set up any of your groups or get you going or take you to the book room and show you around if you need that. But you guys got this. It's going to be amazing. And thank you for all your hard work.